right, and we're back with Brent from CFS. He's going to start walking us through the floor prep process.
Well, this is actually after the prep process, and it doesn't look like there was much prep that needed to be done in this floor. And the purpose of the prep is to level it out to its best capacity. Right now, he's spreading the pressure-sensitive glue that we were talking about earlier. It goes on usually like this. Sometimes it's white, sometimes it's blue. But as it starts to dry, it'll become clear. As you can see, it's already kind of drying over in this area as opposed to where he's moving now. And in about 20 or 30 minutes, it's going to lose a lot of moisture and it's going to begin to tack up. And sometimes we'll put a fan on it to make it go faster. It just depends on what the situation is. So he's going to spread all this glue, leave himself a place to work, starting there and working his way into the room. You can see the red line, that's his control line. We've got an ashlar pattern, which is basically a sideways brick pattern, and he'll be using these control lines to keep the carpet square. And if the walls are out of alignment at any certain place, he knows how to patch it in so that it's not obvious. If we can compensate for some irregularity in the squareness of the room. So, like I said, this is going to tack up for about 20 minutes, maybe 30 minutes, and whenever he feels like it's ready, whenever you touch it and you lift your hand and the glue doesn't come up with your hand, that means it's tacky and ready. Then he'll just start putting in the pieces of carpet and working his way around the room. It's like putting a jigsaw puzzle together almost.
So I see at the door where it meets that tile, it looks like there's a thin layer of concrete. Is that the floor prep we were talking about?
That is the floor prep, and this material is called, made by Ardex, it's called a feather finish, and what it is a highly specified Portland cement. And when I say specified, it's not like buying a bag of concrete. This stuff is high-end concrete. It's very finely ground. They add binders and polymers into it so that when water hits it, it activates and it starts to bind itself. And it's an incredible amount of heat that comes off as that chemical reaction occurs. But the purpose of this is, as you can see, we have a ceramic floor here. So in order to make our carpet fit up nicely against this Schluter, you can see he left about a 1/4 inch of space here in his prep. We had to raise this up a little bit and then fan it out, otherwise the carpet would sit below the Schluter here, the piece of metal, and it would just look awful. You'd have a trip hazard. So we prep to make everything line up well. We also prep, we don't have to do it in this room, but we also prep if there's really bad anomalies, like this is some leftover glue and old concrete, but we're putting carpet in here, so the glue is going to compensate for some of this. But if we were putting down a resilient, like LVT or VCT in this room, the whole room would have to be skim coated, and then they come back over it with a buffer to make it all nice and level, because the resilience will, if the floor is not absolutely flat, it'll show up when you start installing it. You'll have pieces that don't match up, or just all kinds of bad things can happen. So preparation is everything, especially with resilience like LVT or VCT. Not so much with wood, but basically the idea is the thinner the material, the more whatever's underneath it is going to telegraph through. So we try to prepare it so what's underneath it is as smooth as possible. And that's the purpose of the prep, is to correct any anomalies in the existing floor.
Got it.
And that even goes with brand new pours, not old buildings like this only. So because no concrete pour is absolutely perfect. So we have to compensate for that.
Gotcha.
And it's a constant source of aggravation, because we go to IE Square and we say, okay, you got a bad floor in here, and we think it's going to take 30 bags of prep to get the floor right to do what we need to do. And if you haven't put that cost or that thought into it or discussed it with the owner, then all of a sudden it's like, what? So prep is a must happen thing, but it's also an aggravating circumstance in some cases. So we try to get to the job sites early, look over the floor and go, well, our estimating program allots a certain amount of prep depending on the material. and it just automatically feeds that in. Anything above and beyond that has to be recognized by the field superintendent. Say, hey, you know, we got 12 bags in this, but I'm really going to need 24 if you want the score to be right, because, and you do, you know. And so it's prep is kind of a weird thing. You know, it's an expense, and it can get very expensive depending on what problems the floor is having. So we constantly try to be out in front, because the estimators, they don't know. They haven't been here. They're looking at a plan on a computer and they're figuring all this stuff out. And then we come back with pictures or reports as soon as possible, and we say, hey, we're probably going to need more prep than what you've allotted in this job. Please reach out to your project manager on the other side and let them know. Give them an approximation, give them an approximate cost, and that way the project manager on the GC side can go get with the owner or whoever they need to get with and say, hey, you know, we've got this problem. It's going to have to be fixed, and it's probably going to cost this money. And of course, you know, nobody likes to hear that, but it's just the way it is. No floor is ever perfect. It's extremely rare that I walk in and see a perfect floor. It's just, I don't care if it's old or if it's new. So we try to get on that as fast as possible, so it's not a, hey, at the very end, hey, guess what? You owe us an extra, you know, $1,000. What? You know, so you know, we try to get in front of that so nobody gets surprised.
Well, thank you so much for the demonstrations and the in-depth discussion, Brent.
No problem.